My wife poured me a glass of sweet tea on the porch of our Savannah estate and told me I was no longer welcome at Christmas because I made people uncomfortable. I took one slow sip and said nothing. She mistook my silence for surrender. But at exactly 11:47 on Christmas night, I stood in the center of my own living room, looked my son dead in the eyes, and read his criminal indictment out loud in front of 40 witnesses. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And by the time the blue lights painted the Spanish moss outside, 3 people I once loved were in handcuffs. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it started. Let me take you back to the morning my family tried to erase me. Hello, everyone. Take a moment to comment where you are watching from, so I know you are here with me. Also, a brief clarification. Parts of this story have been fictionalized to enhance the narrative. Any resemblance to actual names or situations is unintentional, while the lesson itself remains completely genuine. My name is Raymond Carter. I am 70 years old. For 32 years, I served as a federal judge in the Northern District of Georgia. My courtroom was on the 14th floor of the Richard B. Russell Federal Building in downtown Atlanta. I spent 3 decades listening to liars. I spent 3 decades reading faces, separating truth from performance, fact from fabrication. I sentenced men who stole millions. I sentenced men who destroyed lives with nothing more than a signature and a smile. And in all those years, not a single verdict of mine was overturned on appeal. Not one. I retired 3 years ago. The ceremony was modest. The Chief Justice sent a letter. My colleagues gave me a pen set and a handshake. I walked out of that courthouse carrying 32 years of service in a cardboard box and drove home to a wife who asked me what I wanted for dinner. That was it. No fanfare, no parade, just silence and a pension. I moved between our 2 properties. A townhouse in Buckhead, Atlanta, where I spent most of my time, and an estate on Abercorn Street in Savannah, a 3-story antebellum home with columns and a wraparound porch that I purchased 20 years ago with the inheritance my mother left me. It was my sanctuary, the place where I read books on the porch and listened to the crickets and felt like the world still made sense. It was December 23rd. The morning was cold for Georgia. A thin frost clung to the railing of the back porch at the Buckhead townhouse. I was sitting in my usual chair, wearing my cardigan and reading glasses, holding a cup of black coffee that had gone lukewarm. The backyard was still. A cardinal sat on the fence post, watching me with the kind of attention that reminded me of a courtroom gallery. Gloria came out through the French doors. She was already dressed. Full makeup. Pearl earrings. Her travel coat draped over her arm. She did not sit down. She stood beside me and placed her hand on the back of my chair. Not on my shoulder, on the chair. "Raymond," she said. Her voice was smooth, practiced. It was the voice she used when she had already made a decision and was merely informing me of the outcome. "We need to talk about Christmas." I did not look up from my book. I turned the page. I took a sip of the cold coffee. "What about it?" I said. "We have decided, the family, that it would be best if you stayed here this year." I set the book down on my knee. I looked at her. She was staring at a fixed point above my head, the way witnesses do when they are reciting rehearsed testimony. "Best for whom?" I asked. "For everyone," she said. "You have been tense, Raymond. Difficult. You make Marcus anxious. You made Vanessa cry last week. The children do not want to be around that energy during the holidays. We want a peaceful Christmas." Peaceful. That word landed on the porch like a gavel. It echoed. She wanted peace. What she meant was, she wanted the absence of me. She wanted to celebrate in my house, drink my wine, sleep in my bed, and do it all without the inconvenience of my presence. I looked past her into the kitchen. Through the glass doors, I could see Marcus sitting at the island, scrolling through his phone. He was 35 years old. He was wearing a designer hoodie that cost more than my first suit. He did not look up. He did not come outside to face me. He let his mother deliver the sentence. And then I saw Vanessa, my daughter-in-law. She was 29, blonde, sharp-featured, with the kind of confidence that came not from accomplishment but from proximity to money. She was leaning against the counter, sipping orange juice, watching the porch scene through the glass with the detached curiosity of a cat watching a bird with a broken wing. She smiled at me. It did not reach her eyes. I turned back to Gloria. "Is this unanimous?" I asked. "It is what is best," she repeated. She would not say yes. She would not own the cruelty. She would only repeat the euphemism until I accepted it. "Very well," I said. I picked up my book. I turned another page. "I hope you find the peace you are looking for." Gloria exhaled. She had expected resistance. She had prepared arguments. My compliance disarmed her. She lingered for a moment, uncertain, then turned and walked back inside. The French doors closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like the latch on a cell. I sat on the porch for another hour. I watched them load the car. Suitcases. Gift bags. A case of wine from my cellar that nobody asked permission to take. I watched Marcus carry out a garment bag. I watched Vanessa load her laptop case and 2 large binders into the back seat. And then I saw it. In the trunk, beneath the suitcases, partially hidden by a wool blanket, a cardboard box. It was not a gift box. It was a file box, the kind you buy at an office supply store. And on the side, printed in clean black ink, was a logo I had never seen before. Carter and Associates Legal Consulting. I read it twice. My name, my family name. On a box I had never packed, for a company I had never founded, being loaded into a car that was driving away without me. I said nothing. I did not call out. I did not ask questions. I had spent 32 years on the bench. I knew that the most dangerous thing you can do when you suspect a crime is alert the suspect. So I watched them leave. I raised my coffee cup in a small wave. Gloria waved back from the passenger seat. Marcus honked once. Vanessa did not look up from her phone. The car turned onto Peachtree Road and vanished into the gray morning traffic. The house went silent. The cardinal on the fence post tilted its head at me as if asking what I intended to do. I stood up. I folded my reading glasses into my breast pocket. I carried my cold coffee inside and poured it into the sink. Then I walked down the hallway, past the family portraits, past the framed commendations from 3 governors, past the shadow box containing my judicial robe pin, and into my study. I sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop, and I typed 4 words into the search bar. Carter and Associates Legal. Something was wrong. And after 32 years of reading lies for a living, I could smell one from a mile away. But before I tell you what I found on that screen, I need to take you back 10 days, because the exile did not begin on December 23rd. It began on a Tuesday night in my dining room, when my son asked me for something I could not give him. It was December 13th. Marcus and Vanessa had come over for dinner. Gloria had made pot roast. The table was set with the good china. The candles were lit. It looked like a family gathering. It felt like an ambush. We made it through the appetizers. We made it through the main course. Marcus talked about a new restaurant in Midtown. Vanessa complimented the wine. Gloria smiled and refilled glasses. It was civilized. It was choreographed. Then, between the pecan pie and the coffee, Marcus cleared his throat. "Dad," he said. He put his fork down. He straightened his spine in a way that told me someone had coached him. "I need to ask you something." I leaned back in my chair. I folded my napkin. "Go ahead," I said. "Preston and Whitmore," he said. "The firm downtown. They are hiring a junior associate for their estate planning division. It is a perfect fit for me." He paused. He looked at Vanessa. She gave him a small nod. "I need a letter of recommendation," he said. "From you." I looked at my son. I studied his face. He was 35 years old. He had graduated from Emory Law School 6 years ago. He had failed the Georgia bar examination 3 times. 3 times he had sat in that testing room, and 3 times he had walked out without the license that would allow him to practice law. After the 3rd failure, he stopped trying. He told me he was pursuing other opportunities. He told me the bar was outdated. Irrelevant. A gatekeeping mechanism designed to exclude. I did not argue with him. A man who cannot pass an examination after 3 attempts is a man who has decided that preparation is beneath him. That is not a conclusion I can change with words. Only consequences teach that lesson. Marcus, I said. My voice was measured. I chose each word, the way I chose words in a ruling, with precision and awareness of their weight. You have not passed the bar. He flinched. It was slight, but I saw it. I had spent decades watching men flinch on the witness stand. I know, Dad, he said, but this position does not require bar admission for the first 6 months. It is a probationary role. They just need a recommendation from someone in the legal community. Someone with weight. He looked at me with eyes that wanted me to understand without him having to say it. Someone like you. I took a sip of my coffee. I let the silence stretch. In my courtroom, silence was a tool. It forced people to fill the void. It forced them to reveal themselves. Marcus filled the void. Dad, come on. It is just a letter. You write my name. You say I have good character. You say I come from a legal family. It takes 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes to write, I said. But it carries 32 years of my reputation. And Marcus, I cannot recommend you for a legal position when you do not hold a legal license. He slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. The candle flames trembled. Gloria flinched. Vanessa did not. This is what you always do, he said. His voice was rising. You hold everything over my head. The bar exam. The degree. The career. You never let me forget that I failed. I did not raise my voice. I never raised my voice. The loudest person in a courtroom is always the weakest. I am not holding it over your head, Marcus. I am stating a fact. Facts are not punishments. They are simply true. And the fact is that, if I write that letter, and they discover you have no license, it reflects on me. It suggests I endorsed a fraud. The word landed like a brick. Fraud. I did not mean it personally. I meant it technically. But Marcus heard it as a verdict. So you think I am a fraud, he whispered. I think you have potential that you refuse to activate, I said. I think if you spent 6 months studying instead of 6 months avoiding, you would pass that exam with ease. I believe in your capacity, Marcus. But I will not lie for you. Not even on letterhead. That was when Vanessa spoke. She had been silent through the entire exchange. She had been watching with those pale blue eyes that calculated everything and revealed nothing. She put her wine glass down with a deliberate clink. You know what you are, Raymond? She said. She did not call me Dad. She never did when she was angry. You are cruel. You sit up there on your throne and you judge everyone. You judge Marcus. You judge me. You judge Gloria. You think your robe makes you God. But you are just a bitter old man who cannot stand to see anyone else succeed. The table went still. Marcus looked at his plate. Gloria looked at Vanessa with something between admiration and fear. I held Vanessa's gaze. I did not blink. In 32 years I had been called worse by men facing life sentences. A 29-year-old woman calling me cruel was not going to rattle the bench. I am not cruel, Vanessa, I said. I am honest. There is a difference. Though I understand why you might confuse the two. She stood up. Her chair scraped against the hardwood. She grabbed her purse. Come on, Marcus. We are leaving. He does not deserve our time. Marcus stood. He did not look at me. He followed her to the door like a witness being led out of a courtroom by his attorney. At the threshold, he turned back. You could have just said yes, Dad. It would have cost you nothing. It would have cost me my integrity, I said. And Marcus, that is the only thing I have that no one can take from me. The door slammed. The candles blew out from the draft. Gloria sat across from me, her face a mask I could not read. You should have just written the letter, Raymond, she said quietly. What harm would it have done? I looked at her. I wanted to say the harm would have been invisible but absolute. The harm would have been the quiet erosion of truth. The harm would have been teaching my son that shortcuts are acceptable when convenient. But I did not say any of that. I simply said, I will not sign my name to a lie. That was the incident. That was why I was difficult. That was why, 10 days later, my wife stood on my porch and told me I was not welcome at Christmas, because I would not lie for my son. Now, back in my study on the morning of December 23rd, I stared at the search results loading on my screen. Carter and Associates Legal Consulting. The words glowed on the monitor. I adjusted my reading glasses. I leaned forward. Something was very wrong. And the lie I refused to write was about to become the lie they wrote without me. The Georgia Secretary of State Business Registry loaded in 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, I felt the shift. It was the same shift I used to feel in the courtroom when a witness said something that did not match the evidence. A tightening behind the sternum. A sharpening of the peripheral vision. The instinct that says stop. Pay attention. Something is about to be revealed that cannot be unrevealed. The search returned one result. Carter and Associates Legal Consulting, LLC. Registered on March 14th, 2 years ago. Status: active. Registered agent: Vanessa M. Carter. Principal office address: a commercial mailbox service on Roswell Road in Sandy Springs. I read it again. Vanessa M. Carter. She had dropped the Mitchell. She had taken my name, my family name, the name I had spent 32 years building in the federal courts of Georgia, and she had stamped it onto a limited liability company without my knowledge or consent. I clicked the details. The filing showed 2 members. Vanessa M. Carter, listed as Managing Director. Marcus R. Carter, listed as Chief Consultant. My son. My daughter-in-law. Operating a legal consulting firm. Neither of them had passed the bar. Neither of them held a license to practice law in the state of Georgia, or any state. I removed my reading glasses. I set them on the desk. I pressed my fingertips together and stared at the screen the way I used to stare at a defendant who had just perjured himself. The anger was there, but it was distant. It was behind a wall of procedure. In my courtroom, you did not act on anger. You acted on evidence, and the evidence was only beginning to accumulate. I opened a new browser tab. I typed the company name into the search engine. The website appeared as the first result. It was polished, professional, the kind of website that cost money to build. The homepage featured a large banner image of a courthouse with marble columns. Beneath it, in elegant serif font, were the words, Carter and Associates Legal Consulting. Trusted guidance for life's most important decisions. Founded by Judge Raymond Carter, 32 years of federal judicial experience. Founded by Judge Raymond Carter. I stared at those words until my vision blurred. Then I blinked and kept reading. The About section contained a photograph of me. It was taken at a Bar Association dinner 4 years ago. I was wearing my best Navy suit. I was shaking hands with the Chief Justice. The photo had been cropped to remove the Chief Justice and enlarged so that I appeared to be standing alone, looking directly at the camera with an expression of calm authority. Beneath the photograph was a biography. It was written in the third person. Judge Raymond Carter served for 32 years on the federal bench in Atlanta, Georgia. Known for his unwavering commitment to justice and his expertise in estate law, Judge Carter founded Carter and Associates to provide personalized legal guidance to seniors navigating the complexities of estate planning, trust administration, and elder care decisions. His decades of judicial experience ensure that every client receives counsel of the highest integrity. Every word was a lie. Every sentence was a forgery. I had not founded this company. I had not written this biography. I had not given permission for my photograph to be used. I had not provided counsel to a single client. And yet there I was, smiling on the screen, endorsing a business I had never heard of until 2 hours ago. I clicked on the Services tab. The page loaded with 4 neatly organized categories. Estate planning consultation. $25,000 for a comprehensive review. Trust administration advisory. $15,000 for ongoing management guidance. Elder care legal strategy, $20,000 for a personalized care plan. Legacy protection package, $50,000 for a full-service solution. The prices were absurd. They were the kind of numbers designed to impress wealthy retirees who equated cost with quality. And every service described was, by definition, the practice of law. You cannot advise someone on their estate plan without a license. You cannot administer a trust without a license. You cannot provide legal strategy without a license. In the state of Georgia, the unauthorized practice of law is a felony. It carries up to 5 years in prison and a fine of up to $100,000 per count. Per count. If they had even 10 clients, that was 50 years of potential prison time. I clicked on the testimonials page. There were 7 reviews. Each one featured a first name and a last initial. Each one praised the firm for its compassion and expertise. Margaret H. wrote, "Judge Carter's team helped me understand my options after my husband passed. I felt safe knowing a real judge was watching over my affairs." Henry C. wrote, "The trust restructuring they recommended saved my family thousands. I wish I had found them sooner." Dorothy W. wrote, "After my daughter moved away, I felt lost navigating my estate alone. Carter and Associates gave me peace of mind." I read each testimonial with the cold focus of a man reading a crime scene report. These were not fake names generated for a website. These were real people, real seniors, people who believed they were receiving legitimate legal counsel because my face and my name were attached to the service. I opened a spreadsheet on my desktop. I began to catalog what I had found: company name, registration date, members, services offered, prices, testimonials, photograph usage, biography fabrication. I worked methodically. I did not rush. In 32 years on the bench, I learned that the difference between a case that succeeds and a case that collapses is documentation. You document everything. You assume nothing. You verify every claim. I went back to the website. I clicked on the contact page. There was a phone number, an email address, and a physical address listed as the consultation office. The address was in Savannah, on Drayton Street, 3 blocks from my estate on Abercorn. They had set up their operation in my backyard. I clicked on the team page. There were 3 profiles. The first was mine, the stolen photograph with the fabricated biography. The second was Vanessa, listed as Director of Client Relations. Her photograph showed her in a tailored blazer, smiling warmly. Her bio described her as a certified estate planning specialist. There was no such certification recognized by the state of Georgia. The third profile made my blood pressure rise for the first time that evening. It was Marcus, listed as Senior Legal Consultant. His photograph was professional. His bio read, "Marcus Carter, Emory Law graduate, brings a modern perspective to traditional estate planning. His innovative approach ensures clients receive forward-thinking counsel tailored to their unique needs." Emory Law graduate. That was technically true. He did graduate. He simply never passed the bar to practice what he had learned. And yet here he was, listed as a legal consultant, using his degree as a shield to deceive people into thinking he was qualified to advise them on matters that could destroy their lives. I closed the laptop. I removed my glasses again. I pressed my palms flat against the cool surface of the oak desk. My son and his wife had built a predatory business on the foundation of my reputation. They were charging seniors tens of thousands of dollars for services they were not legally qualified to provide. They were using my name, my photograph, and my judicial title as the bait. And they had been doing it for 2 years. Right under my nose. 3 blocks from my front porch in Savannah. I thought about the testimonials. Margaret H. Henry, C. Dorothy, W. Real people, real money, real trust. Shattered by people wearing my name like a costume. I opened the laptop again. I was not finished. The website was the surface. I needed to see what was underneath. I needed to see the money. I needed to see where it went and who it hurt. Because this was not a family embarrassment. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a criminal enterprise operating under the seal of a federal judge. And the federal judge was going to shut it down. I sat in the silence of my study for a long time after I closed the laptop. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked with the steady cadence of a courtroom timer. Outside, the winter sun was already beginning to fade. My mind was operating on two levels. The father in me was processing grief. The judge in me was building a case. And as always, the judge won. Grief is a luxury that belongs to the aftermath. In the middle of a crisis, you work. You gather. You prepare. But before I could investigate further, I needed to do something immediate. Because 400 miles north, my wife and son were driving towards Savannah with my credit cards in their wallets. Every dollar they spent from this point forward was a dollar that connected me to their fraud. Every receipt with my account number was a thread tying me to a conspiracy I had never joined. I picked up the telephone on my desk. I dialed the private banking number for First National. I had been a client for 31 years. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter," the account manager said. Her name was Patricia. "How can I assist you today?" "Patricia," I said, "I need an immediate freeze on the supplementary Visa card issued to Gloria Carter. Card ending in 7214. I also need the same freeze applied to the supplementary card issued to Marcus Carter. Card ending in 3908. There was a pause. The soft click of a keyboard. "Are the cards lost or stolen?" "Neither," I said. "I have reason to believe the spending on those cards is no longer authorized by the primary account holder. Freeze them. Decline everything starting immediately." "Done, sir." "Is there anything else?" "Yes. I want a full transaction history for both cards for the past 24 months sent to my secure email." I hung up. I leaned back in my chair. The leather creaked. And somewhere on Interstate 16, my wife was about to discover that the unlimited fountain she had been drinking from for 40 years had just run dry. I did not have to wait long. At 4:27, my cell phone rang. "Gloria." I let it ring 3 times. On the 4th, I answered. "Hello," I said. I made my voice thick and groggy, as if I had been napping. "Raymond." Her voice was a blade. "Something is wrong with the card." "Which card?" I asked. "Mine. I am at a restaurant on the highway. The bill is $312, and the card is declining. The waitress is staring at me. Fix it." I rubbed my eyes. "That is strange," I said. "Have you tried running it again?" "Of course I tried," she hissed. 3 times. It beeps and says declined. This is humiliating, Raymond. I let a long pause settle over the line. In my courtroom, I called this a judicial pause. The silence that makes everyone lean forward. "Gloria," I said slowly. "I received a call from the bank this morning. They flagged unusual activity, spending patterns that did not match our typical usage. They initiated a security protocol, a temporary hold." "A temporary hold?" Her voice climbed half an octave. "When does it get released?" "They said because of the geographic discrepancy, the card being used 400 miles from the primary residence, they need the account holder to verify in person at a branch. Then go to the branch. Go right now." "I cannot, Gloria. It is December 23rd. The branch closed at noon for the holiday. They will not reopen until December 26th. The silence that followed was exquisite. It was the silence of a woman who has never been told no by a cash register. I could hear the ambient noise of the restaurant behind her, the clink of glasses, the murmur of conversations that were not hers. "Raymond," she said. Her voice dropped. "Transfer money to Marcus. He can pay." "I cannot do that either," I said. His card was flagged as well. Same security protocol. The system treats all supplementary cards as a single unit. If one is compromised, they all get frozen. "You are doing this on purpose," she said. "You are punishing us." "I am not punishing anyone, Gloria. I am sitting in an empty house because you told me I was not welcome at Christmas. I am simply dealing with a bank issue. Perhaps you should use cash." The line went quiet. I knew why. Marcus did not have money in his own account. He had not earned a salary in 4 years. Everything he spent came through my cards or through whatever Carter and Associates was generating from its victims. "We will figure it out," she said. Her voice was clipped. "But I expect the card to work by tomorrow. We have expenses." Expenses. I knew what those expenses were now. They were not Christmas gifts. They were operational costs for a fraudulent business wearing my name. "I will do my best," I said. "Merry Christmas." I hung up before she could respond. I set the phone face down on the desk. I unplugged the landline. I did not want to hear it ring again tonight. She thought I was punishing her for a bad dinner. She had no idea I was cutting the oxygen supply to a criminal enterprise. She had no idea that the old man she left behind was not sulking in his chair. He was building a case. I turned back to my laptop. The financial records would arrive in a few hours. The website evidence was documented. The Secretary of State filing was printed and filed. But I was not done. The website showed me the surface. The testimonials showed me the victims. Now I needed to see the damage. I needed to hear from the people whose lives had been destroyed by a business carrying my name. I opened my email. I navigated to the spam folder. I had a suspicion that the people who wrote those reviews might have also tried to contact me. The real me. I clicked on the folder. 214 unread messages. I scrolled past the pharmaceutical ads and the digital garbage. And there, scattered like bones in a landfill, I found them. "Judge Carter, please respond. I need help. Mr. Carter, your office is not returning my calls. Dear Judge Carter, I trusted your firm. Something is wrong." 14 of them. 14 emails from 14 different people. All sent within the last 18 months. All addressed to me. All begging for help from a man who did not know they existed. I opened the first one, and what I read made the room feel like a coffin. The first email was from a woman named Ruth Pemberton. She was 74 years old. She lived in Decatur. Her husband had died 8 months prior, and she had been referred to Carter and Associates by a friend at her church. "Dear Judge Carter," she wrote, "I paid your firm $25,000 for an estate planning consultation. Your associate Vanessa met with me 3 times. She recommended I restructure my late husband's pension into a new trust. She said it would protect my assets from probate. I signed the papers she gave me. Now my pension payments have stopped. My bank says the funds were redirected to an account I do not recognize. I have called your office 11 times. No one answers. Judge Carter, I am 74 years old. That pension is all I have. Please help me." The email was dated September 15th, 3 months ago. No one had responded. Ruth Pemberton had been screaming into a void for 90 days. I opened the second email. A man named William Okafor, 81, retired postal worker from Macon. He had paid $15,000 for trust administration advisory. Vanessa had convinced him to transfer the deed of his home into what she called a protective living trust. 3 weeks later, he received a notice from a property management company informing him that his house had been listed for sale. The trust, it turned out, was controlled by Carter and Associates. They were selling his home out from under him while he slept in it. I opened the third, the fourth, the fifth. Each email was a variation of the same crime. Elderly people, widows, widowers, retirees living on fixed incomes. They had walked into a Savannah office 3 blocks from my house, seen my photograph on the wall, read my biography, and handed over their life savings to a woman with a clipboard and a smile. The amounts varied: 15,000, 20,000, 35,000, 50,000. But the method was consistent. Vanessa conducted the initial consultation. She recommended restructuring. She produced documents that looked official, but contained clauses that transferred control of assets to entities owned by Carter and Associates. The clients signed because they trusted the name on the door. My name. I created a spreadsheet. I entered each victim's name, their age, the amount paid, and the damage described in their email. The column of numbers grew. Ruth Pemberton, 74. 25,000. Pension redirected. William Okafor. 81. 15,000. Home listed for sale, without consent. James and Edna Park. 77 and 75. 30,000. Savings account drained. Helen Rosenthal. 83. 40,000. Trust dissolved. Funds missing. Name after name. Life after life. The total climbed past 1 million. Then 2 million. When I finished cataloging all 14 emails, the number at the bottom of my spreadsheet read $3,200,000. 3.2 million. Stolen from people who had earned every cent through decades of labor. Stolen by people who shared my blood and bore my name. I pushed back from the desk. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street. The Christmas lights on the neighbor's house blinked red and green in a cheerful rhythm that felt obscene given what I had just read. I returned to the computer. The emails told me what had been stolen, but I needed to understand how. I needed to see the mechanism. I needed to see the document that opened the door. I went back to the first email from Ruth Pemberton. She had attached a PDF. I opened it. It was a letter of recommendation, a letter of endorsement written on what appeared to be my personal stationery. Dear Mrs. Pemberton, the letter read, I am writing to personally recommend the services of Carter and Associates Legal Consulting. As the founder of this firm, I have assembled a team of dedicated professionals who share my commitment to protecting the interests of our senior clients. I have full confidence in my associate Vanessa Carter, who will be handling your consultation personally. You are in excellent hands. Sincerely, Judge Raymond Carter, retired. Beneath the text was my signature, the distinctive loop on the R, the sharp downstroke of the C, the authoritative flourish at the end that I had developed over 3 decades of signing federal orders. But I had not written this letter. I had not signed this letter. I had never seen this letter before in my life. I zoomed in on the signature. I increased the magnification to 400%. I studied the pixels. The ink was uniform, perfectly consistent in weight and density. There were no pressure variations. No subtle thickening where the pen would naturally press harder at the start of a stroke. It was a digital copy. A scan. They had lifted my signature from another document and pasted it onto this letter. I thought about what documents of mine contained my signature that they could have accessed. Birthday cards. Christmas cards. The anniversary card I sent Gloria 2 years ago. The Christmas card. 2021. I had signed 50 cards that year, one for each family friend. Marcus and Vanessa had helped me address the envelopes. They had handled every card. They had access to my signature on 50 separate documents. I opened the other emails. 4 more contained attached endorsement letters, each one identical in structure, each one bearing my forged signature, each one personally recommending that the recipient trust Vanessa Carter with their financial future. This was identity theft. This was forgery. This was a federal crime that carried up to 20 years in prison. I saved every attachment. I printed every email. I backed up the spreadsheet to 3 separate locations. Then I opened my bank's secure portal. The transaction history Patricia had promised was waiting in my inbox. I downloaded it and opened the file. 24 months of spending. I scrolled past the grocery charges and the gas station fills. I was looking for something specific. I was looking for deposits, incoming transfers, and there it was. A recurring deposit labeled Carter Family Trust. Monthly, ranging from $8,000 to $22,000. Deposited into a joint checking account I did not know existed. An account with 2 signatories, Gloria, Emmy Carter, and Vanessa, Emmy Carter, my wife. My wife was receiving the stolen money. Every month, like clockwork, the funds flowed from the victims through the firm and into an account my wife controlled. She was not just aware of the fraud, she was the treasurer. I closed the file. I removed my glasses. I placed them on the desk with a deliberate precision that kept my hands from shaking. 14 victims. $3.2 million. forged signatures, a family trust I never authorized, and my wife of 40 years signing the deposit slips. The clock read 11:47 at night. I had been at this desk for 14 hours. My coffee was cold. My back ached. But my mind was clear, clearer than it had been in years. This was no longer a family matter. This was a criminal conspiracy. And every person sitting in that car heading to Savannah was a co-conspirator. The 14th email was different from the others. It was not angry. It was not demanding. It was the quietest one in the folder, and it was the one that broke something inside me that I did not know could still break. The subject line read simply, "Please, Judge Carter. I have nowhere else to turn." It was sent on August 19th, 4 months ago. 4 months this woman had been waiting for a response from a man who never knew she was calling. I opened it. "Dear Judge Carter, my name is Margaret Holloway. I am 78 years old. I was a public school teacher for 41 years in Chatham County. I taught 3rd grade. I retired in 2009. My husband Harold passed away 14 months ago from pancreatic cancer. He was a good man. He worked at the port his whole life. He left me the house and his pension and a small savings account. It was not a fortune, but it was enough. It was enough for me to live quietly and not be a burden to anyone." I paused. I could hear her voice in the words. It was the voice of a woman who had spent her life being careful, being modest, being grateful for what she had. I kept reading. 6 months after Harold died, a woman from your firm came to my church. She gave a presentation about protecting your assets after the loss of a spouse. She was very kind, very professional. She said she worked for you. She said you had founded the firm because you wanted to help people like me, people who had worked hard and deserved to keep what they earned. I believed her because of your name, Judge Carter. Everyone in Savannah knows your name. Everyone respects you. Harold used to say you were the only honest man left in Georgia. The woman's name was Vanessa. She came to my house. She sat at my kitchen table and drank the tea I made her. She looked at Harold's papers. She told me my pension was vulnerable. She told me my house could be taken by creditors if I did not restructure. She told me I needed a protective trust. I signed everything she put in front of me. I signed because your name was on the letterhead. I signed because your photograph was on the wall of her office. I signed because I thought you were watching over me the way Harold used to. I gave her $280,000, Judge Carter. That was everything. Harold's pension buyout. Our savings. The emergency fund he kept in a separate account for 30 years. I gave her all of it, because she said it would be safe. My hands had stopped moving on the keyboard. I was not scrolling anymore. I was sitting perfectly still. The way you sit when someone on the witness stand begins to cry, and you know that what they are saying is the absolute truth. It has been 5 months. The pension payment stopped. The savings account is empty. And last week, I received a letter from a property company saying my house, the house Harold and I raised our children in, the house I have lived in for 43 years, has been transferred to something called the Carter Legacy Holdings Trust. They say I no longer own it. They say I have 30 days to vacate. I am 78 years old. I have no family nearby. My daughter lives in Oregon. She does not have room for me. I have $1,400 in a checking account that Vanessa did not know about. That is all I have left in this world. Judge Carter, I am not writing to threaten you. I am not writing to sue you. I am writing because I believe in my heart that you are a good man, and I believe something has gone wrong that you do not know about. Please, if you are the man Harold believed you were, please help me. I have nowhere else to turn. I do not want to die in a shelter. Sincerely, Margaret Holloway. I do not want to die in a shelter. I read that sentence 7 times. Each time it hit me in the same place. Not in my mind, not in my logic. In the space behind my ribs where I kept the things I did not show the world. This woman, this 78-year-old retired school teacher, who spent 4 decades teaching children to read. This widow who made tea for the woman who robbed her. This human being who still believed in my integrity, even as my name was being used to destroy her life. She wrote to me for help, and her letter sat in my spam folder for 4 months, 122 days. While I read books on my porch and drank coffee and argued about Christmas plans, Margaret Holloway was counting her remaining dollars and wondering if she would spend her final years on the street. I stood up from the desk. I walked to the window. The street was dark. The Christmas lights on the houses across the road twinkled with a mocking cheer. I placed my forehead against the cold glass and closed my eyes. I thought about Harold Holloway, a port worker, a man who spent his life loading and unloading ships so his wife could teach and his children could eat. A man who saved for 30 years so that his widow would never have to worry. And in 6 months, everything he built was stolen by a woman who sat at his kitchen table and drank his tea. I opened my eyes. I stepped back from the window. I looked at my hands. They were shaking, not from cold, not from age, from the kind of fury that lives beneath the surface of a man who has spent his entire career being measured and controlled and deliberate. I walked back to the desk. I sat down. I printed Margaret Holloway's email. I placed it on the desk, centered, directly in front of me. I placed my palm flat on the paper, as if I were swearing an oath. This was no longer an investigation. This was a mission. Every other email was evidence. This one was a warrant. Margaret Holloway had not filed it in any court. She had filed it in my conscience. And my conscience had just issued its ruling. I was going to find this woman. I was going to restore what was taken from her. And I was going to ensure that the people who did this to her, my son, my daughter-in-law, my wife, would face the full weight of every law they had broken. Not as a father, not as a husband, as a judge. The only role I had left that still meant something. I looked at the clock. It was past midnight. December 24th. Christmas Eve. The day my family thought they were celebrating their victory. The day I began planning their defeat. I picked up my phone. I had calls to make in the morning. But first, I needed to sleep. Not because I was tired. Because tomorrow required precision. And precision requires rest. I turned off the desk lamp. The room went dark. But my mind was illuminated. Every synapse firing. Every instinct engaged. Margaret Holloway trusted my name. I was going to make that trust mean something, even if it cost me everything else. I woke at 5:45 on the morning of December 24th. The house was dark and cold. I had not adjusted the thermostat before bed. It did not matter. The chill sharpened my focus. I showered. I shaved. I dressed in a pressed white shirt and charcoal trousers. I put on my watch. I knotted my tie. I was not going to a courtroom, but I was going to war. And a man goes to war in uniform. I made coffee. 1 cup. Black. No sugar. I drank it standing at the kitchen counter, looking at the backyard where the frost was still clinging to the dead grass. The cardinal was back on the fence post, watching me again. At 7 o'clock sharp, I sat down at my desk and picked up the phone. The number I dialed was not in my regular contacts. It was written on the back of a business card I kept in the top drawer of my desk, tucked behind my passport, a card I had not looked at in over a year. Special Agent Denise Watkins, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes and Elder Fraud Division, Atlanta Field Office. Denise and I had a history. 15 years ago, she was a junior agent assigned to a Medicare fraud case that came through my courtroom. The defendant was a physician billing for procedures he never performed on patients who were already dead. Denise had built the case. I had issued the warrant, the search orders, and ultimately the sentence. 18 years federal. After the verdict, she shook my hand in the hallway and said, "Judge Carter, if you ever need anything, you call this number." I was calling. The phone rang twice. Then her voice. Sharp. Alert. Already working despite the holiday. Watkins. "Denise," I said. "This is Raymond Carter." A pause. then warmth beneath the professionalism. Judge Carter. It has been a long time. Merry Christmas Eve. What can I do for you? I did not waste her time with pleasantries. I spoke the way I spoke when issuing a ruling. Clear, structured, without unnecessary words. Denise, I have evidence of a criminal enterprise operating under my name without my knowledge or consent. The operation is called Carter and Associates Legal Consulting. It is run by my daughter-in-law Vanessa Carter and my son Marcus Carter. They are conducting the unauthorized practice of law. They are targeting elderly victims. They have stolen approximately $3.2 million over the past 18 months through forged documents bearing my signature. I have 14 identified victims. I have financial records. I have the corporate filings. And I have reason to believe they are conducting a fundraising operation tonight at my property in Savannah to recruit additional victims. The line was silent for 3 seconds. I heard the scratch of a pen on paper. Then Denise spoke. Judge Carter, this falls under federal jurisdiction on multiple counts. Wire fraud if any communications cross state lines. Mail fraud if they used postal services. Elder abuse under the federal statutes. And the forged signature puts identity theft on the table. All of the above, I said. Where are the subjects right now? Driving to Savannah. They will be at my property at 124 Abercorn Street by this afternoon. They are hosting an event this evening. I believe the purpose is to solicit additional investments from wealthy retirees in the area. I heard her typing. Fast. Urgent. Judge Carter, I need 24 hours to get a warrant. I need to present the evidence to a magistrate. Can you send me everything you have? I will have it in your inbox within the hour, I said. Good. And Judge Carter, do not confront them. Do not alert them. Let them proceed with the event. If they solicit funds tonight with fraudulent representations, that is another count for each victim. The more rope we give them, the tighter the noose. I understand, I said. I spent 32 years watching people hang themselves with their own words. I know how to wait. One more thing, she said. Her voice softened slightly. Are you okay, Langston? This is your family. She had called me by the wrong name. It did not matter. Her concern was genuine. I am fine, Denise, I said. I am doing what needs to be done. I hung up. I exhaled slowly. The first call was complete. The federal machinery was now in motion. 24 hours. By this time tomorrow, Denise Watkins would have a signed warrant and a tactical team standing by. But I needed a second front. The criminal case would take months to resolve. In the meantime, I needed to protect my assets. I needed to sever the legal ties that bound me to Gloria before she could claim any portion of my estate in the aftermath. I dialed Catherine Park. She was my civil attorney, a Korean-American woman in her early 50s who practiced family law with the precision of a surgeon. She answered on the second ring. Raymond, she said. What is happening? It is Christmas Eve. Catherine, I need you to prepare 3 documents. First, a petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and financial fraud. Second, a restraining order against Marcus Carter and Vanessa Carter, prohibiting them from using my name, likeness, or professional title. Third, a motion to freeze the Carter family trust pending forensic audit. She was quiet for a moment. Then, how fast do you need these? Filed by December 27th, I said. The day the courts reopen. I will have drafts to you by tonight, she said. Raymond, is there anything else I should know? Yes, I said. My wife has been receiving stolen funds into a joint trust account I did not authorize. She is a co-conspirator. The prenuptial agreement we signed 40 years ago contains a clause that voids all spousal claims in the event of financial crimes against the estate. Clause 9, Catherine said. I remember drafting the amendment. I will pull the file. Thank you, Catherine. I hung up. 2 calls, 2 fronts activated. Criminal and civil. Federal and state. They would converge like 2 rivers meeting at a single point. And that point was my family sitting in my house in Savannah. But I was not finished. There was one more thing I needed to confirm before I made my next move. Marcus had left his old laptop in the guest room 3 weeks ago. He had come for Thanksgiving and forgotten it in the rush to leave. I had placed it in the closet, intending to return it. I never did. I walked to the guest room. I opened the closet door. The laptop was on the top shelf, beneath a folded blanket. It was a silver MacBook with a cracked screen protector. I carried it to my desk and opened it. The password screen appeared. I thought for a moment. Marcus was not a complicated man. His passwords were never sophisticated. I typed the first thing that came to mind. Emily, followed by the year of her birth. Emily, his daughter, my granddaughter, the only innocent person in this entire equation. The screen unlocked. I navigated to his email. The inbox was a mess. Hundreds of unread messages. I did not have time to read them all. I typed a single word into the search bar. Conservatorship. 3 results appeared. The most recent was from December 20th, 4 days ago. The sender was an attorney named David Whitfield. The subject line read, Carter conservatorship filing. Hearing confirmation. I opened it. The words on the screen turned my blood to ice. David, Marcus had written, we are on track. The Christmas gathering will give us at least 15 witnesses who can attest to Dad's declining mental state. Vanessa is coaching them on what to say. We file on January 3rd. The hearing will be fast. Once we have the conservatorship, we control everything. The house, the accounts, the trust, all of it. I read it twice. January 3rd. 10 days from now. They were planning to stand before a judge, a colleague of mine, and declare me mentally incompetent. They were going to use the Christmas party guests as witnesses. Witnesses coached by Vanessa. To lie under oath. They were not just stealing from strangers. They were coming for me next. I scrolled through the email thread between Marcus and David Whitfield. There were 11 messages in total, spanning 6 weeks. The earliest was dated November 8th. 6 weeks of planning. 6 weeks of my son building a legal cage to put me in while I sat on my porch drinking coffee, believing the worst of my problems was a difficult daughter-in-law. The attorney's instructions were clinical, methodical. He had done this before. Marcus, Whitfield, had written on November 15th. For the conservatorship petition to succeed, we need to demonstrate a pattern of cognitive decline. Isolated incidents are not sufficient. We need multiple witnesses who can attest to confusion, aggression, inability to manage finances, and failure to recognize familiar people or situations. The more witnesses, the stronger the case. A holiday gathering is ideal. People are relaxed. They observe behavior in a social context. If your father displays any erratic behavior, we can document it immediately. I kept reading. Marcus had responded the same day. Vanessa says she can prep the guests. She will tell them Dad has been struggling. She will frame it as concern. They will be watching him all night. Anything he does, anything at all, can be used. Even normal stuff can look bad if you describe it the right way. Like if he repeats a story, that is memory loss. If he gets frustrated, that is aggression. If he sits alone, that is withdrawal. I read that paragraph 3 times. My son was not just passively going along with a scheme. He was actively strategizing how to weaponize my normal behavior against me. He was learning to reframe reality. A repeated story becomes dementia. Frustration becomes violence. Solitude becomes mental deterioration. Whitfield had replied with a list. Documents needed for filing. Sworn affidavits from at least 5 non-family witnesses describing cognitive or behavioral decline. A letter from a medical professional recommending evaluation. Financial records showing erratic or irrational spending patterns. Evidence of self-neglect or inability to maintain living conditions. I stopped at the second item. A letter from a medical professional. I searched the email thread for the word doctor. 1 result appeared. Dated December 10th, 13 days ago. Marcus had written, Vanessa's friend from college is a psychiatric nurse practitioner. She said she can write a letter based on our descriptions without needing to examine him in person. She will say she observed concerning behavior at a family function. Is that enough? Whitfield responded. It is not ideal, but it will get us past the initial hearing. Once the temporary conservatorship is granted, we can order a full evaluation from a court-appointed physician. By that point, the burden shifts to your father to prove competency. And at 70, with the right narrative in place, that is an uphill battle. The burden shifts to your father to prove competency. I knew this. I had seen it from the bench. Conservatorship cases were among the most devastating in family law. Once a temporary order is granted, the respondent, the person being declared incompetent, must prove their own sanity. They must hire attorneys. They must submit to evaluations. They must fight from inside a system that has already labeled them as broken. And the system moves slowly. A temporary conservatorship can last 6 months before a full hearing. During those 6 months, the conservator controls everything: bank accounts, property, medical decisions. They can sell your house. They can liquidate your investments. They can put you in a facility. I kept scrolling. The final email in the thread was from December 20th, 3 days before they exiled me from Christmas. Whitfield wrote, "Filing date confirmed for January 3rd. I have reserved the hearing room. Judge Morrison is presiding. He tends to grant temporary orders quickly when there is medical documentation and multiple witnesses. I recommend you have the affidavits notarized and ready by December 26th. The Christmas gathering should provide ample opportunity." Marcus replied, "Perfect. Dad will not be at the party. We told him he was not welcome, so we can talk freely. Vanessa will brief the guests tomorrow night. They will sign the affidavits on the 26th. By January 3rd, we will have everything we need. Dad will not be at the party. We told him he was not welcome. The exile was not about healing. It was not about tension. It was not about me being difficult. They removed me so they could operate without oversight. They cleared the room so they could coach 40 witnesses to testify against my sanity. The entire Christmas ban was a tactical maneuver. I closed the email. I closed the laptop. I placed my palms flat on the desk and breathed. $6 million. That was the value of my combined assets: the townhouse in Buckhead, the estate in Savannah, the investment portfolio, the pension, the savings, 40 years of work, 40 years of discipline, 40 years of sacrifice. And in 10 days, they were going to walk into a courtroom and take all of it, unless I stopped them. I thought about Denise Watkins. She had said 24 hours for the warrant. 24 hours for the FBI to assemble a team and position them near Savannah. That meant the tactical operation would happen on Christmas night. After the party, after the solicitation. But the conservatorship was a separate threat. The FBI would arrest them for fraud. But the affidavits could still be filed. The witnesses could still sign. David Whitfield could still submit the petition. Even from a jail cell, the legal machinery could grind forward if the documents were already notarized. I needed to be there. Not after the party. During it. I needed to be present when those witnesses were being coached. I needed them to see me. To see that I was not confused, not aggressive, not incompetent. I needed to stand in front of 40 people and demonstrate, beyond any reasonable doubt, that Raymond Carter was in full command of his faculties. And then I needed to show them exactly who had lost their minds. I stood up. I walked to the hallway closet. I pulled out my overcoat, the charcoal one, the one I wore to sentencing hearings. I put it on. I picked up my car keys from the hook by the door. I was not going to wait for January 3rd. I was not going to sit in this empty house while they built their case against me 400 miles away. I was going to Savannah. Tonight. Christmas Eve. I was going to walk into my own house uninvited. I was going to stand before those 40 witnesses, and I was going to deliver a verdict they would never forget. I checked my watch. It was 11:30 in the morning. Savannah was 4 hours south. If I left by 5, I would arrive by 9, The party would be in full swing by 10. That gave me time to prepare. I walked back to my study. I had work to do, evidence to organize, calls to make, witnesses of my own to invite. The hunt was no longer about investigation. The evidence was gathered. The allies were activated. The legal machinery was turning. Now it was about execution. And after 32 years of delivering justice from behind a bench, Judge Raymond Carter was about to deliver it in person. I left Atlanta at 5:15 in the evening. The sky was already dark. December in Georgia brings short days and long shadows. My black Lexus merged onto Interstate 16 heading southeast. Savannah was 4 hours away. The road stretched out in front of me, like a sentence I had not yet finished writing. The rain started near Macon. A light mist at first, then heavier, drumming against the windshield with the insistence of a prosecutor making closing arguments. I turned on the wipers. I kept my speed steady at 70. I was not in a rush. I had calculated the timing. Arrive at 9. Observe. Prepare. Enter. At the right moment. But between Macon and Savannah, I had calls to make. Calls that would transform this from a one-man operation into something larger. Something with witnesses. Something with weight. I pressed the button on my steering wheel. I said the name out loud to the car's voice system. Margaret Holloway. I had found her phone number in the email header. A Savannah area code. The phone rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when a voice answered. Thin. Cautious. The voice of a woman who had learned to be afraid of phone calls. Hello? Who is this? Mrs. Holloway, I said. My name is Raymond Carter. Judge Raymond Carter. I believe you wrote me a letter. The silence that followed was so long I thought she had hung up. Then I heard a sound that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. It was a gasp that turned into a sob. A single, broken exhale that contained 4 months of waiting and hoping and losing faith. Judge Carter? She whispered. Is it really you? It is really me. Mrs. Holloway. Oh Lord. Oh Lord. She was crying now. Full, heaving sobs that made the phone speaker crackle. I wrote you. I wrote you so many times. I thought you did not care. I thought you were part of it. I did not want to believe it, but when no one answered, I thought maybe Harold was wrong about you. Harold was not wrong, I said. My voice was steady, but my chest ached. Mrs. Holloway, I need you to listen to me carefully. I did not write you that recommendation letter. I did not found that firm. I have never met you before this phone call. My name and my signature were stolen by members of my own family and used without my knowledge or consent. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her response. So you did not send her? That woman? Vanessa? No, ma'am. I did not. She took my house, Judge Carter. She took Harold's pension. Everything he saved. We were married 51 years. He worked at the port in the heat and the cold and the rain, so I would never have to worry. And now it is gone. All of it. Gone. I know, I said. And I am going to get it back. The words came out of me before I had time to consider whether they were a promise I could keep. But sitting in that car, listening to this woman weep over the destruction of her life, I knew I would move heaven and earth to make those words true. How? She asked. How can you fix it? I need your help, Mrs. Holloway. The people who did this to you are hosting an event tonight at my property in Savannah. I am driving there now. I intend to confront them publicly, and I have contacted the FBI. But I need witnesses. I need the people they hurt to be present. Can you be at 124 Abercorn Street by 10:30 tonight? She was quiet for a moment. Then her voice came back. Stronger. Steadier. The voice of a woman who taught third graders for 41 years and did not tolerate nonsense. I will be there, she said. You tell me what time, and I will be there with bells on. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had produced in 2 days. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. I will see you tonight. I hung up. I took a breath. Then I made the next call. Henry Chen, 74. Retired engineer. lost $400,000 and his retirement home in Midtown Savannah. He answered. I explained. He cursed loudly in Cantonese, then said, "Give me the address. I will bring my documentation." Dorothy Williams, 80, retired nurse. Lost her house of 40 years, a house her parents had built with their own hands, she answered. She did not cry. She said, "I have been praying for this day, Judge Carter. What time do you need me?" James Park, 77. His wife Edna was 75. They lost $30,000 of their grandchildren's college fund. James said, "We will both be there. Edna wants to look that woman in the eye." Ruth Pemberton, 74. The first email, lost her pension. She said, "I thought no one was coming. I thought we were invisible." "You are not invisible," I told her. "Not anymore." 5 calls. 5 confirmations. 5 people who had been silenced and stolen from, now given a stage and a voice. They would stand in my living room tonight, and they would tell the truth. And the truth, delivered by the victims themselves, would be more powerful than any warrant or indictment. My phone rang at 7:45. The caller identification read Watkins, D. "Judge Carter," Denise said. "We have the warrant. Signed by Magistrate Judge Thornton 40 minutes ago. My team is mobilizing now. We will be in position by 10 tonight. Staging area is a church parking lot on Drayton Street, 2 miles from your property." I exhaled. "Good," I said. "I need to know your plan," she said. "You are going inside?" "I am," I said. Denise paused. "That is unusual, Judge. Typically, we advise victims to stay clear of the subjects." "I am not a typical victim, Denise." "No," she said. "No, you are not." "All right. We will monitor. When you are ready for us, send a single text. The word now. 1 word. We will be at your door in under 3 minutes." "Understood," I said. "Judge Carter, be careful. These are desperate people. Desperate people make bad decisions." "I know," I said. "I sentenced them for 32 years. I hung up." The highway was dark now. The rain had eased to a drizzle. The signs for Savannah began to appear. 60 miles, then 40, then 20. At a gas station outside of Pooler, I pulled over to fill the tank. I stood in the cold mist, watching the numbers click upward on the pump. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message. From Marcus. "Dad, hope you are doing okay alone tonight. We miss you. Merry Christmas Eve." Heart emoji. Christmas tree emoji. I stared at the screen. The blue light illuminated my face in the darkness. "We miss you." 4 hours ago, he was coaching witnesses to testify that I was losing my mind. 4 hours ago, he was finalizing the paperwork to steal my home. And now he was sending me a Christmas tree emoji. I wanted to feel nothing. I wanted the judge in me to dismiss it as evidence of manipulation. And it was. I knew it was. But he was still my son. And somewhere beneath the lies and the greed, there was still the boy who used to run into my arms when I came home from the courthouse. The boy who used to sit on my lap and ask me what justice meant. I closed the message. I did not reply. I put the phone back in my pocket. I finished filling the tank. 20 miles to Savannah. 40 minutes to the confrontation. I got back in the car. I turned the key. The engine hummed. The wipers cleared the mist from the windshield. I was not ready for what I was about to do. No father ever is, but I was going to do it anyway. Because the boy who asked about justice deserved to finally learn what it felt like. The last stretch of highway between Pooler and Savannah is flat and dark. The marshland spreads out on both sides of the road, like a black sea. The air smells of salt and decay, even through the closed windows of the car. It is the smell of things breaking down, things returning to their elemental state. I drove in silence. No radio, no music, just the hum of the engine and the soft rhythm of the wipers clearing the mist. In that silence, the memories came. I did not invite them. They simply arrived. The way witnesses arrive at a trial, unbidden but necessary. Marcus at 5 years old, standing in the kitchen of our first apartment in East Atlanta, wearing pajamas with rockets on them, holding a picture book about a firefighter, asking me to read it for the fourth time that night. I was exhausted. I had spent 12 hours reviewing case files for a racketeering trial, but I sat on the floor with him and read every page. He fell asleep against my chest, and I carried him to bed with the book still open on my lap. Marcus at 12. I had taken him to the courthouse for the first time. Not to a hearing. To the empty courtroom on a Saturday morning. I let him sit in my chair. I let him hold the gavel. He asked me what it felt like to decide if someone was guilty. I told him, "It does not feel like power, Marcus. It feels like responsibility. Every person who stands in front of you is someone's child. And your job is not to punish them. Your job is to make sure the truth is heard and the consequences are fair." He had looked at me with eyes that were wide and serious. "That sounds hard, Dad." "It is," I said. "But hard things are usually the right things." Marcus at 22. Graduating from Emory. The cap and gown. The smile. Gloria crying in the audience. I shook his hand that day, then pulled him into an embrace. I whispered in his ear, "I am proud of you, son. Now go make it mean something." He never did. He failed the bar. He drifted. He married Vanessa. And somewhere in the drift, the boy who asked about justice became a man who sold it to the highest bidder. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The memories were not helping. They were making this harder. I needed to push them back behind the wall. I needed the judge, not the father. The Savannah exit appeared in my headlights. I took it. The road narrowed. The landscape shifted from highway to live oaks draped in Spanish moss. The trees formed a canopy over the road like the ceiling of a cathedral. In the darkness, with the mist weaving between the branches, it looked like a passage into another world. I drove through the historic district, past the squares with their monuments and fountains, past the old mansions with their iron gates and gas lanterns. Savannah at night is a city that belongs to ghosts. The streets were nearly empty. Christmas Eve had driven everyone indoors. I turned onto Abercorn Street, my street, and then I saw it. The estate was ablaze with light. Every window glowed. The porch lanterns were lit. The driveway was lined with luxury vehicles. Mercedes, BMWs, a black Cadillac Escalade, a white Range Rover that I recognized as Vanessa's. I did not pull into the driveway. I drove past, slowly, my eyes scanning the scene. Then I turned left on the next block and parked on a side street beneath a live oak, whose branches hung so low they brushed the roof of my car. I turned off the engine. The silence of the street settled around me. I checked my watch. 9:52. The party was in full swing. I stepped out of the car. The air was cool and damp. It smelled of magnolia and river water. The distant sound of music drifted through the night. Something classical, something expensive sounding. I buttoned my overcoat. I straightened my tie. I began to walk. 2 blocks. That was all that separated me from the confrontation. 2 blocks of cracked sidewalk beneath ancient oaks. The Spanish moss hung like curtains above me, swaying in the breeze. My footsteps were steady on the pavement. Not fast, not slow. The pace of a man who knows exactly where he is going and exactly what he will do when he arrives. I rounded the corner onto Abercorn. The house rose before me. 3 stories of white painted wood and black shutters. The wraparound porch with its rocking chairs. The garden where Gloria had planted roses that I watered every Sunday. My house, built with my money, filled with my furniture, bearing my name on the deed. And through the tall front windows, I could see them. 40 people, maybe more, standing in clusters, holding champagne flutes, laughing. The men in dark suits, the women in holiday dresses. It looked elegant. It looked respectable. It looked like everything it was not. I moved closer. I stood beneath the magnolia tree at the edge of my front lawn, hidden in its shadow. From here, I had a clear view through the living room windows. And there she was, Vanessa, standing at a podium that had been set up in front of my fireplace. Behind her, projected on a screen that had been mounted over my mantel, was a photograph of me. The same photograph from the website. Me in my Navy suit. Me looking trustworthy and authoritative. Me being used as a prop in my own home. She was speaking. I could not hear the words through the glass, but I could see her gestures, the practiced hand movements, the warm smile, the way she touched her chest when she wanted to appear sincere. She was performing, she was selling, and the audience was buying. I could see them nodding. I could see a man in the front row pulling out a checkbook. I could see Gloria standing near the bar, wearing the emerald necklace I bought her for our 30th anniversary, holding a glass of wine, and laughing with a woman I did not recognize. They were using my house, my name, my photograph. My wife was complicit. My son was somewhere in that room, smiling and shaking hands and pretending to be the heir to an empire built on theft. I looked at my watch. 10:03. Margaret Holloway would arrive at 10:30. Henry Chen, Dorothy Williams, the Parks, Ruth Pemberton. They were coming. They were preparing to face the people who had robbed them. And in that room, Vanessa was probably telling those 40 wealthy strangers that I was in a care facility somewhere, that I was confused and frail, and unable to manage my own affairs. That the best way to honor my legacy was to write a large check to the bright future of Carter and Associates. I stepped back into the shadow. I was not ready yet. I needed my witnesses here first. I needed the pieces in place. But soon, very soon, I would walk up those steps. I would open that door, and I would show them all exactly how competent Judge Raymond Carter still was. The oak trees whispered above me. The moss swayed. Savannah held its breath. And so did I. I stood in the shadow of the magnolia for 23 minutes. In that time, I watched Vanessa complete her presentation. I watched the audience applaud. I watched men reach into their jacket pockets and pull out checkbooks. I counted 6 checks being written from my position beneath the tree. 6 new victims in the making. 6 more lives about to be dismantled by a woman in a silver dress using my name as currency. I also watched the audience more carefully. Among the 40 or so guests, I recognized faces. Not all of them were strangers. Not all of them were new targets. Near the back of the living room, seated in my wingback chair, was a woman I recognized from the website testimonials. Helen Rosenthal, 83. She had lost $40,000. She was sitting there, in my house, watching the presentation. She looked confused. She looked like she wanted to ask a question but was too polite to interrupt. She did not know she was sitting in the den of the people who had robbed her. Near the bookcase, standing alone with a glass of sparkling water, was a thin man in a brown suit. I matched his face to the name in my spreadsheet. Franklin Gibbs, 79. Lost $22,000. He was at the party. They had invited their own victims back. They were double-dipping, soliciting new funds from people they had already stolen from. The audacity was staggering. But it was also tactically brilliant in a sickening way. If the victims were present at the event, they appeared to be willing supporters. If they signed affidavits about my mental decline, they became complicit. They became witnesses who could not later testify against the firm without implicating themselves. Vanessa was turning the victims into shields. I pulled out my phone. The screen glowed in the darkness. I opened my messages and typed a text to Denise Watkins. 40+ targets inside. Active solicitation in progress. 6 new checks written in last 20 minutes. I have also identified previous victims in attendance being used as unwitting character witnesses. Operation is live. Stand by for my signal. The reply came in 8 seconds. Copy. Team in position. Awaiting your go. Stay safe, Judge. I put the phone away. I looked back at the house. The music had changed. Something festive. Bing Crosby. White Christmas. The irony was unbearable. Then I heard footsteps behind me on the sidewalk. Slow. Careful. The sound of someone walking with the deliberate caution of age on a damp surface. I turned. Margaret Holloway was walking toward me beneath the oak canopy. She was small, barely 5 feet tall. She wore a navy blue church dress and a wool coat buttoned to her throat. Her gray hair was pinned neatly beneath a modest hat. She carried a large handbag over her arm that looked like it contained everything important she had left in the world. She stopped when she saw me. She studied my face in the dim light from the distant street lamp. "Judge Carter?" she asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Holloway," I said. I extended my hand. She did not take it. She stepped forward and put her arms around me. It was a brief embrace, but it carried the full weight of her gratitude and her grief. When she stepped back, her eyes were wet. "Thank you for believing me," she said. "Thank you for writing," I said. Behind her, a car pulled up quietly on the side street. The door opened. Henry Chen stepped out. He was wearing a dark suit that looked like it had been pressed specifically for this occasion. He carried a manila folder under his arm. His documentation. He nodded at me. No words necessary. 2 minutes later, Dorothy Williams arrived in a taxi. She was tall and straight-backed. Despite her 80 years, she wore a long black coat and carried a walking cane with a silver handle. She looked at the glowing house, and her jaw tightened. "That is where they took me," she said. "That office on Drayton Street. They hung your picture behind the desk. I thought I was meeting you." "I know," I said. "I am sorry." "Do not apologize for their sins, Judge," she said. "Just make sure they pay for them." James and Edna Park arrived together. They held hands. James carried a folder similar to Henry's. Edna carried a tissue in her free hand. She had been crying in the car. Ruth Pemberton was the last to arrive. She came on foot, walking quickly despite her age, as if she was afraid that if she slowed down she might lose her nerve. 6 of us now, standing in the dark beneath the Spanish moss. 6 people whose lives had been touched and torn by the same lie. We looked at each other in the dim light. We were not an army. We were not a SWAT team. We were a collection of seniors in church clothes and pressed suits. But we had something more powerful than weapons. We had the truth. And we had been waiting a long time to speak it. I looked at my watch. 10:37. Inside, the party was reaching its peak. The music was louder. The laughter was brighter. Vanessa was circulating now, shaking hands, accepting checks, probably promising impossible returns on charitable investments. Then I saw it. Through the front window. Vanessa approached an elderly woman I did not recognize. She was frail, small. She had white hair and wore a green dress. Vanessa guided her to a side table. She sat her down. She produced a stack of documents from a leather folder. I watched the old woman pick up a pen. She was about to sign. Another victim. Another life. Happening right now while I stood in the dark. I turned to Margaret and the others. "It is time," I said. Margaret straightened her hat. Henry adjusted his folder. Dorothy planted her cane on the ground. The Parks squeezed each other's hands. Ruth took a breath. I turned toward the house. I straightened my tie. I buttoned the top button of my overcoat. The porch steps were ahead of me. 3 steps. Painted white. I had painted them myself 2 summers ago. I climbed them. 1, 2, 3. I stood before the front door. The brass knocker gleamed in the porch light. The sound of music and voices leaked through the wood. Somewhere inside, my wife was laughing. Somewhere inside, my son was shaking hands. Somewhere inside, an old woman was signing away her future. I placed my hand on the brass doorknob. It was cold. It was familiar. It was mine. Behind me, 6 witnesses waited on the lawn. Above me, the stars of Christmas Eve burned through the clearing clouds. And inside, 40 people were about to learn the difference between a difficult old man and a dangerous one. I turned the knob. I pushed the door open. And I stepped into the light. The door swung open, and the warmth hit me first. Then the sound. The murmur of 40 conversations colliding in a single room. The clink of crystal. The soft undercurrent of holiday music that someone had chosen to make wealthy people feel generous. And then the silence. It did not come all at once. It rippled outward from the doorway like a stone dropped into still water. The people nearest the entrance saw me first. A couple holding champagne flutes turned, and their smiles froze. A man in a pinstripe vest stepped backward into the bookcase. A woman gasped. I stood in the doorframe for 3 full seconds. I let them look. I let them register my face. The face that was currently projected on a 6-foot screen behind the podium. The face they had been told belonged to a senile old man rotting in a care facility. That face was now standing in front of them, fully dressed, fully alert, and radiating the kind of authority that only comes from decades of commanding silence in a room. I stepped inside. My shoes clicked on the hardwood floor. The sound was precise, deliberate, like a gavel striking wood. Vanessa saw me. She was standing near the fireplace, holding a glass of white wine and laughing at something a gray-haired man had said. The laugh died on her lips like a candle in a sudden wind. Her face went through a sequence of expressions so rapid they blurred together. Surprise, confusion, recognition, terror. The wineglass slipped from her fingers. It did not shatter. It bounced once on the thick rug and rolled, leaving a trail of Chardonnay on the Persian weave. She did not pick it up. She did not move. I walked forward. I did not look left or right. I looked straight ahead, at the podium, at my photograph on the screen, at the banner that read Carter and Associates in gold lettering across my fireplace mantel. The crowd parted for me, not because they understood what was happening, but because something primal in them recognized the energy of a man on a mission. They stepped aside the way you step aside for a storm. Vanessa recovered. She planted herself in my path, 3 steps from the podium. Her hands were raised. Her face rearranged itself into concern. "Dad," she said loudly enough for the room to hear. "What are you doing here? You are supposed to be resting. Did you drive all this way alone? Are you confused?" She was performing. Even now, with the walls closing in, she was performing. She was trying to establish the narrative in front of 40 witnesses. The confused old man who wandered into the wrong room. I stopped. I looked at her. I gave her the look I had given hundreds of defendants over 32 years. The look that said, "I have read your file. I know what you did, and what happens next is entirely your fault." "Sit down, young lady," I said. My voice carried across the silent room without effort. I did not raise it. I did not need to. 32 years of projecting authority in a courtroom had trained my vocal cords the way a musician trains an instrument. Every word landed in the far corners of the room. Court is in session. The confusion in the room deepened. People looked at each other. Who was this man? Why was he here? What did he mean by court? Vanessa did not sit. She stood her ground. Her eyes were wide and calculating. She was looking for an exit. She was looking for Marcus. I walked past her. I stepped behind the podium. I looked out at 40 faces. Some curious, some alarmed, some already reaching for their coats. I placed both hands on the podium. I squared my shoulders. "Good evening," I said. "My name is Raymond Carter, Judge Raymond Carter. I served 32 years as a federal judge in the Northern District of Georgia. I retired 3 years ago. I am 70 years old. I am of sound mind and body. And I am standing in my living room, in my house, on my property, a property that is deeded to me, and me alone." I paused. I let that settle. Some of you may be wondering why my face is on that screen behind me. I am wondering the same thing. Because I did not authorize it. I did not found this firm. I did not write the biography on their website. I have never provided legal consultation to anyone through an entity called Carter and Associates, and I have never, in my life, signed a single document endorsing the services being sold to you tonight. The room had gone absolutely still. The only sound was the faint hiss of the heating system and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I looked at Vanessa. She had retreated to the far side of the room. She was gripping Marcus's arm. Marcus was white as paper. His mouth was opening and closing like a man drowning in shallow water. The firm called Carter and Associates, I continued, was registered 2 years ago by my daughter-in-law, Vanessa Carter, without my knowledge or consent. It has been operating illegally in the state of Georgia, providing legal services without a license. This is a felony. It carries 5 years in prison per count. I reached into the inside pocket of my overcoat. I withdrew a leather folder, 2 inches thick. I placed it on the podium with a weight that made the wood creak. But that is not the worst of it, I said. I opened the folder. In the past 18 months, this firm has defrauded 14 elderly victims of a combined $3.2 million. They have forged my signature on endorsement letters. They have redirected pensions. They have transferred property deeds without consent. They have stolen homes from widows and savings from retirees. I looked at the audience. Their faces had changed. The polite curiosity was gone, replaced by the dawning horror of people who realize they are standing in a crime scene. I lifted the folder and held it where everyone could see. This folder contains 47 exhibits, I said. Financial records, forged documents, corporate filings, bank transfers, email correspondence. It documents every dollar stolen, every lie told, every life destroyed. It is complete. It is verified. And copies have already been delivered to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I set the folder down. I looked directly at the elderly woman who had been about to sign Vanessa's documents. She was still sitting at the side table, pen frozen in midair. Her eyes were wide. "Ma'am," I said gently, "please put that pen down. Whatever you were about to sign, do not sign it. You are being defrauded." She dropped the pen as if it had burned her. I turned back to the room. "Now," I said, "I would like to introduce you to some people. People who trusted my name the way you were about to trust it. People who lost everything because of that trust." I looked toward the front door. It was still open. The night air was drifting in. "Mrs. Holloway," I called, "would you please come in?" Margaret Holloway walked through the front door, with the quiet dignity of a woman who had spent 41 years standing before a classroom of children who needed her to be brave. She was small. Her navy dress was pressed. Her hat was straight. Her eyes were red from tears she had shed on the walk up the driveway, but her chin was lifted. She walked into that room the way a witness walks to the stand. Afraid, but willing. The guests turned to look at her. They did not know who she was, but they could feel the gravity she carried. I stepped aside from the podium. I extended my hand toward her. "This is Margaret Holloway," I said. "She is 78 years old. She was a public school teacher in Chatham County for 41 years. Her husband, Harold, worked at the Savannah port for 34 years. He passed away 14 months ago. He left her a pension, a savings account, and a house they shared for 43 years. Mrs. Holloway, would you please tell these people what happened after your husband died?" Margaret stepped forward. She did not go to the podium. She simply stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by strangers in expensive clothes. And she spoke. "6 months after Harold passed," she said, her voice steady but thin, "a woman came to my church. She said she worked for Judge Carter. She said Judge Carter had started a firm to help widows like me protect what their husbands left behind. She gave me a letter. It had the judge's signature on it. I believed it because I trusted his name." She paused. She looked at Vanessa. Vanessa was pressed against the far wall, still gripping Marcus's arm. Her face was a mask of controlled panic. "That woman," Margaret said, pointing directly at Vanessa. "She came to my home. She sat at my kitchen table. She drank my tea. And she took everything. $280,000. Harold's pension. Our savings. And 3 weeks ago, I received a letter saying my house no longer belongs to me." The room was silent. Not the polite silence of a dinner party. The horrified silence of people witnessing something they cannot unsee. Margaret continued. I am 78 years old. I have $1,400 to my name. I do not know where I will live next month. And all because I trusted a name. She stopped. She wiped her eyes with a handkerchief she pulled from her coat pocket. Then, she stepped back. She did not collapse. She did not weep dramatically. She simply stood there, small and immovable, and let the truth do its work. I looked at the room. Faces had changed. The man who had written a check earlier was staring at the paper in his hand, as if it were a snake. Is there anyone else? A woman in the audience asked. Her voice was shaking. I looked toward the door. Mr. Chen, I said. Henry Chen walked in. He was precise in his movements, military bearing despite his age. He carried his manila folder like a shield. My name is Henry Chen, he said. He did not wait for me to introduce him. I am 74 years old. I am a retired civil engineer. 2 years ago, this firm charged me $400,000 for trust restructuring services. The result was that my retirement account was drained, and the deed to my home was transferred to an entity I have never heard of. I have the documentation here. He held up the folder. The room stared. Dorothy Williams came next. Tall, regal, her walking cane tapping on the hardwood. I am Dorothy Williams, she said. I am 80 years old. My parents built my house with their own hands in 1952. I lived there my entire life. This firm took it from me in 4 months. They told me I was protecting it. Instead, they stole it. Her voice did not waver. She looked at the guests with an expression that dared them to doubt her. James Park stepped forward with his wife Edna. They held hands so tightly their knuckles were white. We lost $30,000, James said. It was our grandchildren's college fund. We saved for 15 years. Gone in a single wire transfer that we did not authorize. Ruth Pemberton was last. She was trembling, but she spoke. I cannot pay my electric bill this month, she said. I was a legal secretary for 30 years. I thought I knew how to read a contract, but I trusted the name on the door, and now I have nothing. 5 testimonies, 5 lives destroyed, 5 people standing in a room full of wealth, asking only to be believed. The room erupted, not in applause, in outrage. The man with the check tore it in half. He dropped the pieces on the floor. A woman in pearls turned to Vanessa. You monster, she said. You absolute monster. Another guest pulled out his phone. He was dialing. Probably his lawyer. Vanessa broke. She lurched forward from the wall, shaking free from Marcus. Her face was wild. Her carefully constructed composure shattered like the wine glass she had dropped earlier. This is a setup, she screamed. He is senile. He does not know what he is saying. That woman is an actress. They are all actors. He hired them. He is crazy. Someone call the police. He should not be here. He is supposed to be in a facility. I did not respond to her. I did not need to. The 5 witnesses standing behind me were more powerful than any rebuttal I could offer. They were the evidence. They were the verdict. A man near the door spoke. He was tall, bald. He wore a Rolex. His voice was calm and cold. Lady, he said to Vanessa, I was about to write you a check for $75,000. I think I will be writing it to my attorney instead. Vanessa screamed again, something incoherent. She looked at Gloria, who had not moved from her position near the bar. Gloria was frozen. The emerald necklace glittered on her chest. Her wine glass was still in her hand, but her fingers were white around the stem. She said nothing. She did nothing. She was a statue, watching her world collapse. Then Marcus moved. He pushed past 2 guests. He stumbled into the center of the room. His suit was disheveled. His tie was crooked. His eyes were glassy, with tears that had not yet fallen. He looked at me, not at the judge, at his father. And for the first time in years, I saw the boy he used to be underneath the man he had become. Frightened, lost, reaching for the only hand that had ever pulled him out of the dark. He dropped to his knees. On the hardwood floor of my living room, in front of 40 witnesses, my son knelt. Dad, he said. His voice cracked on the word. Please. I am sorry. I did not know it would go this far. I just wanted to make something work. I just wanted you to see me as someone who could succeed. Please, Dad. Please stop this. I looked down at my son. My hands were at my sides, and for the first time since I began this campaign, my voice did not come easily. It stuck in my throat like a splinter. The judge in me wanted to say, the evidence speaks for itself. But the father in me simply looked at the boy kneeling on the floor and felt the oldest, heaviest grief a man can carry. I looked at my son kneeling on the floor. The room was holding its breath. 40 pairs of eyes watched us. The 5 victims stood behind me like a silent jury. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked with a rhythm that sounded like a heartbeat slowing down. Marcus was crying. Real tears. Not the performance tears of his wife. These were the tears of a man who had just realized that the ground beneath him was gone, that there was no speech, no apology, no amount of pleading that could undo what he had done. I wanted to reach down and pull him up. The father in me wanted to brush off his knees the way I did when he was 4 years old and fell off his bicycle in the driveway. The father in me wanted to say, "Get up, son. We will figure this out together." But the father had been silenced. The father had been exploited. The father had been declared incompetent by the very hands now clasped together in supplication. I spoke. My voice did not break, but it wavered. For the first time in this entire ordeal, it wavered, and I let it. Because what I was about to say deserved the weight of genuine emotion. You knew, Marcus. He flinched as if struck. You knew when you took Mrs. Holloway's house, a 78-year-old widow, a woman who taught children for 41 years. You knew when you signed the papers that transferred her deed. You knew she had nothing else. Dad, You knew when you forged my signature. My name. The name I spent 32 years building. You took it and you stamped it onto letters designed to lure vulnerable people into a trap. Marcus shook his head. It was Vanessa's idea. She planned everything. You just followed, I said. You just went along. You just cashed the checks and drove the Range Rover and pretended you did not know where the money came from. He had no answer. His head dropped. His chin touched his chest. He looked like a marionette whose strings had been cut. And you knew, I said, my voice dropping lower, when you drove me to that clinic 2 weeks ago and tried to have me medicated into silence. You knew when you planned to file a conservatorship petition on January 3rd. You knew when you told 40 people I was in a care facility. You knew all of it, Marcus. Every step of the way. He was sobbing now, heaving, undignified. The sounds of a man who had been stripped of every pretense and forced to stand naked before the consequences of his choices. I turned away from him. I turned to the bar where Gloria stood. She had not moved. She had not spoken. She was holding her wine glass so tightly, I thought the stem would snap. I walked toward her. The crowd parted again. They watched me the way they would watch the final scene of a play, unable to look away despite the discomfort. I stopped 3 feet from my wife. I looked at her face. The makeup that had been perfect hours ago was cracking under the strain. Her lower lip was trembling, but her eyes were dry. She was fighting. She was still fighting to maintain control of something, anything. And you, I said. She flinched. You signed the checks, Gloria. Every month. 8,000, 12,000, 22,000. Deposited into the Carter Family Trust, an account I never authorized. An account that received stolen money from 14 people who trusted my name. Gloria opened her mouth. For a moment, I thought she would deny it. I thought she would perform the way Vanessa performed. I thought she would scream, or deflect, or blame. She did none of those things. Her mouth closed. Her eyes filled. A single tear rolled down her cheek, cutting a track through her foundation. She looked at me not with anger or defiance, but with the flat, exhausted acceptance of a woman who has been running from a truth that finally caught her. I know, she whispered. 2 words. That was all she gave me. No excuse, no justification, no apology. just the acknowledgement that she knew, that she always knew, that she chose the money over the man. I looked at her for a long moment. The emerald necklace caught the light. I remembered buying it. I remembered the way she smiled when she opened the box. I remembered thinking, this is what love looks like. A beautiful stone given freely. I was wrong. Love is not a stone. It is a choice made every day, and she had stopped choosing me a long time ago. I reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out my phone. The screen glowed. I opened the message app. I typed one word. Now. I pressed send. I put the phone back in my pocket. The room was still. The victim stood behind me. Marcus was still on the floor. Gloria was still at the bar. Vanessa was somewhere against the far wall, her screaming having faded to a whimper. Then the light changed. It started as a flicker through the front windows. Blue. Then red. Then blue again. The pattern was unmistakable. The color of authority. The color of consequences arriving. The guests saw it. They turned toward the windows. Someone whispered, "Police." It was not police. It was more than police. The sound came next. Car doors opening in rapid succession. The heavy thud of boots on pavement. The jangle of equipment. The crisp, professional sound of people who do this for a living. Approaching a target. The front door was still open from when Margaret had entered. The night air poured in, cold and electric. And through that open door, silhouetted against the blue and red strobing lights, came Special Agent Denise Watkins. She was wearing a tactical vest over her suit. Her badge was on a chain around her neck. Behind her, fanning out with practiced precision, were 11 more agents, FBI in white letters on their backs. They moved into the room like water filling a vessel, flowing around the furniture, around the guests, positioning themselves with the efficiency of people who had rehearsed this operation. Denise walked directly to me. She stopped. She looked me in the eye. There was respect in her gaze. There was also something that might have been sorrow. "Judge Carter," she said. Her voice was clear and professional. "My team is here to execute a federal warrant for the arrest of Vanessa Carter, Marcus Carter, and Gloria Carter on charges of wire fraud, identity theft, unauthorized practice of law, and 14 counts of elder abuse." She turned to face the room. "FBI," she announced. Her voice filled the space with the same authority mine had minutes ago. Nobody moves. The room obeyed. The room was frozen. 12 agents stood positioned throughout the living room, their presence a wall of federal authority that no one in designer clothing dared to challenge. Denise Watkins moved through the space with the calm efficiency of a woman who had executed dozens of these operations. She was reading from a warrant, her voice steady and measured. "Vanessa Carter, you are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, unauthorized practice of law, and 14 counts of elder abuse. Marcus Carter, you are under arrest on the same charges. Gloria Carter, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and receipt of stolen property." Vanessa did not wait to hear her rights. The moment Denise spoke her name, she bolted. She kicked off her heels and sprinted toward the kitchen, toward the back door that led to the garden. She moved fast, faster than I expected. She did not make it. 2 figures stepped into the kitchen doorway from the outside. U.S. Marshals. They had been positioned at the rear exit since before I walked through the front door. Vanessa slammed into the first one. He caught her by the arms. She twisted. She clawed. She screamed with a fury that was no longer human. It was animal. It was the sound of a predator realizing it had become the prey. "He is lying," she shrieked as they turned her around and pressed her against the kitchen counter. "Check his medications. He is on antipsychotics. He is delusional. Everything he said is a fantasy. He does not know where he is." One of the marshals looked at Denise. Denise shook her head once. The marshal pulled Vanessa's wrists behind her back. The handcuffs clicked shut. The metal sound was quiet, but in the silence of that house, it rang like a church bell. Vanessa kept screaming as they led her through the living room. She twisted her neck to look at the guests. "Call my lawyer," she yelled. "Call Alan Whitfield. This is illegal. He cannot do this. He is not a judge anymore. He has no authority." No one moved to help her. No one reached for a phone on her behalf. They watched her being escorted through the front door the way you watch a car accident. Horrified. Unable to look away. Grateful it was not you. Marcus was still on the floor where he had fallen. Two agents approached him. They were gentle, professional. One of them placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sir, we need you to stand up." Marcus stood. He did not resist. He did not run. He simply rose to his feet like a man waking from a dream he knew he could not return to. His hands hung at his sides. The agents brought them behind his back. Before the cuffs closed, Marcus looked at me. His face was wet. His eyes were swollen. But beneath the tears, there was something else. Something small and desperate and reaching. "Dad," he said. His voice was hoarse, broken down to its base components. It was her idea. All of it. She planned everything. "I just wanted to make you proud. I just wanted you to look at me the way you used to. Like I was enough." The words hit me in the chest. Not like a fist, like a blade, thin and precise and impossible to pull out without doing more damage. I looked at my son. I looked at the man who had forged my name. The man who had tried to have me declared incompetent. The man who had stolen homes from widows and pensions from the elderly. And I saw, beneath all of it, the 12-year-old boy sitting in my chair asking what justice meant. "Proud men do not steal from widows, Marcus," I said. My voice was quiet. Not angry, just final. The cuffs clicked. They led him toward the door. He did not scream. He did not thrash. He walked with his head down, shoulders curved inward, as if trying to make himself small enough to disappear. Gloria was last. She had not moved from her position at the bar. The wine glass was still in her hand, though it must have been empty for 20 minutes. A female agent approached her. She was young, respectful. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." Gloria set the glass down on the bar. She placed it carefully, precisely, as if this small act of control was the last one she would ever have. She stood straight. She smoothed her dress. She removed the emerald necklace and placed it on the counter beside the glass. Then she turned and extended both wrists toward the agent. Her hands were steady. Her face was dry. "I know," she said again. The same two words she had given me. But this time, they were not addressed to me. They were addressed to the universe. To the inevitability of this moment. To the 30 years of choices that had led her to this place. The agent cuffed her gently. Gloria did not look at me as they guided her toward the door. She looked straight ahead. Whatever was between us, whatever final words she might have said, she kept them sealed behind her lips. The room emptied of criminals. The guests were being spoken to by agents taking statements. Margaret stood near me. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were small and warm and strong. "Thank you, Judge Carter," she said. "You gave me my life back." I squeezed her hand. I could not speak. I simply nodded. Outside, through the open front door, I watched them lead Marcus to the waiting vehicle. The Christmas lights on the roofline blinked red and green and white against the darkness. The Spanish moss swayed in the cold breeze. Snow had begun to fall. Light flakes drifting through the beams of the porch. Lights like tiny fragments of the life I used to have. Marcus reached the car. The agent opened the rear door. And Marcus stopped. He turned his head. He looked back at the house. At me. Standing in the doorway of the home, where he had taken his first steps. He opened his mouth. I saw his lips form a word. But no sound came out. Or if it did, the wind took it before it reached me. I raised my hand. Not a wave. Not a blessing. Just a gesture. The gesture a man makes when he has said everything there is to say, and the only thing left is to let go. Marcus turned away. He ducked into the car. The door closed. The vehicle pulled out of the driveway. The taillights disappeared down Abercorn Street, into the falling snow. The house emptied slowly after that. The agents finished their work. The guests departed in stunned silence. Margaret and the others were taken aside by victim services coordinators who promised restitution and follow-up. And then it was just me. I stood in my living room. My living room. The banner reading Carter and Associates hung crooked on the wall above the fireplace. I walked over to it. I reached up. I grabbed the cheap vinyl material and pulled. It came down in one long, slow tear. I folded it once, twice. I carried it to the trash can by the front door and placed it inside. Then I went to the bar. I found the bottle of bourbon I kept on the second shelf. The good one. The one I saved for verdicts that mattered. I poured 2 fingers into a crystal glass. I raised it to the empty room. The first drink of Christmas morning. The courtroom on the 14th floor of the Richard B. Russell Federal Building felt smaller than Raymond remembered. He had spent 32 years behind the bench in rooms like this one, but he had never sat in the gallery. He had never been a witness. He had never watched his own family stand in the place where criminals stood. It was the second Tuesday of March. Outside, Atlanta's dogwoods were beginning to bloom, their white petals pressing against the tall windows like silent spectators. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and old paper. The Honorable Judge Patricia Simmons presided, a woman Raymond had mentored 20 years ago when she was a nervous clerk fresh out of Emory Law. She did not look at him. Professional distance. He respected that. Marcus entered first. He wore a navy suit that Raymond recognized because he had bought it for his son's 30th birthday. 5 years ago. A lifetime ago. Marcus's hands were cuffed in front of his body, and his attorney, a young public defender named Daniel Reeves, guided him to the defense table with a hand on his elbow. Marcus did not look at his father. He stared at the table, as though it contained instructions for survival. Vanessa followed. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore no makeup. The transformation was deliberate. Gone was the confident woman who had stood at a podium in Savannah, selling lies to elderly retirees. In her place was someone designed to look fragile, remorseful, small. Raymond noted the performance. He had seen it 1,000 times from 1,000 defendants. It rarely worked on experienced judges. Gloria entered last. She was not in handcuffs. Her attorney, a silver-haired man named Richard Calloway from Calloway and Strauss, had negotiated her cooperation agreement 3 weeks after the arrest. Gloria had provided access to financial records, email correspondence, and 3 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, totaling $412,000. In exchange, she faced reduced charges. A single count of conspiracy. Possible probation. No prison time if the judge accepted the recommendation. Raymond watched his wife walk to her seat. She was 67, none of them did. He was the ghost they had tried to bury, and now he sat in the room breathing, alive, holding a leather folder on his lap. The prosecution called its first witness, Margaret Holloway. She entered through the side door, wearing a navy dress and low heels, her white hair pinned neatly. She carried nothing in her hands. She did not need documents. She had lived the evidence. The bailiff swore her in, and she sat in the witness chair with the posture of a woman who had taught 41 years of students to sit up straight. Assistant United States Attorney Brenda Whitfield approached. She was calm, methodical. She asked Margaret to describe how she first encountered Carter and Associates Legal Consulting. Margaret explained the seminar at the Savannah Civic Center. The professional brochures, the photograph of Judge Raymond Carter on the wall, the promises of asset protection for widows, the warmth of the young woman named Vanessa who held her hand and said, "We treat our clients like family." Margaret described signing the documents, handing over Harold's pension, the savings account, the emergency fund, $280,000 total. She described the day 4 months later, when she received a letter stating her home of 43 years had been transferred to Carter Legacy Holdings. She described standing in her kitchen holding that letter, alone, with $1,400 in her checking account and nowhere to go. Her voice did not break. It remained steady, clear. clear, dignified, and that made it worse. Raymond gripped the armrest of his seat. He had read her email. He had heard her story on the phone. But hearing it in this room, under oath, in the place where he had once delivered justice, was different. It was heavier. Henry Chen testified next. Then Dorothy Williams. Then James and Edna Park. Then Ruth Pemberton. 5 victims. 5 stories. 5 lives dismantled by people who shared Raymond's last name and had used his reputation as a weapon. The evidence was overwhelming. Special Agent Denise Watkins presented the financial forensics, 14 victims, $3.2 million in documented losses, 47 exhibits, including forged signatures, fraudulent incorporation documents, unauthorized wire transfers, and email chains discussing the conservatorship plot against Raymond himself. The jury received binders thick enough to serve as doorstops. Marcus's attorney attempted a defense built on coercion. Marcus was influenced by his wife. Marcus was desperate after failing the bar examination 3 times. Marcus never intended harm. The argument dissolved under cross-examination when Brenda Whitfield produced an email from Marcus to David Whitfield, dated December 20th, discussing how to ensure Raymond would be declared incompetent by January 3rd. Vanessa's attorney offered no defense. She entered a guilty plea on all counts midway through the second day. Wire fraud, identity theft, 14 counts of elder abuse, unauthorized practice of law. The plea carried a recommended sentence of 12 to 15 years. Marcus, seeing his wife's capitulation, changed his plea on the 3rd day. Guilty, all counts. His recommended sentence was 8 to 12 years, reduced for cooperation. Gloria's hearing was separate, brief, administrative, 1 count of conspiracy, 3 years of supervised probation, community service, full restitution participation. Judge Simmons accepted all pleas. Sentencing was scheduled for April. Raymond left the courthouse alone. He walked down the granite steps he had climbed 10,000 times in his career. The dogwood petals fell around him like confetti at a parade nobody was celebrating. He reached his black Lexus in the parking garage, sat behind the wheel, and placed both hands on the leather steering wheel. He did not cry. He did not smile. He breathed. It was over. The trial was finished. The machine of justice had moved, and it had moved correctly. But the man who had spent his life building that machine now understood something he had never grasped from the bench. Justice does not heal. It confirms. It records. It punishes. But it does not return what was taken. It does not rebuild what was broken. He started the engine and drove north toward Buckhead, toward the empty townhouse, toward whatever came next. 6 months after the sentencing, Raymond Carter sold the Savannah estate. He did not sell it out of hatred. He did not sell it out of grief. He sold it because every room in that house now carried a memory that had been poisoned. The dining room where Vanessa had pitched her fraudulent seminars to practice guests. The study where Gloria had signed checks, routing stolen money into the Carter family trust. The porch where Marcus had rehearsed his charm, perfecting the smile that convinced elderly widows to hand over their life savings. The house was beautiful. Georgian columns, antebellum bones, a garden that bloomed jasmine every May. But beauty means nothing when it has been used as a stage for cruelty. The buyer was a young couple from Charleston. Teachers, both of them. They had a 3-year-old daughter who ran across the hardwood floors during the showing, laughing at the echo her shoes made. Raymond watched her from the doorway and thought about how laughter could reclaim a space. He signed the papers that afternoon. $3.1 million. He did not negotiate. Of that money, Raymond allocated $1.4 million to a restitution fund. Not court-ordered restitution. That process was already underway through the federal system, slow and bureaucratic and unlikely to make any victim whole within a decade. This was personal restitution. Direct. Immediate. Margaret Holloway received her house back first. Raymond's attorney, Catherine Park, filed a motion to void the fraudulent transfer. The deed was restored within 6 weeks. But Raymond also wrote Margaret a personal check for $42,000, covering the mortgage payments she had missed, the legal fees she had incurred trying to fight the theft alone, and 6 months of living expenses, so she could breathe without panic. He delivered the check himself, driving to her small brick house on a Tuesday morning. She opened the door in a floral housecoat, saw him standing on her porch, and said nothing for a long time. Then she said, "Harold would have liked you." Raymond nodded. That was enough. Henry Chen received $112,000 to restore his retirement account to functional levels. Dorothy Williams received her home free and clear, plus a renovation fund of $38,000 because the house built in 1952 needed a new roof and updated plumbing. James and Edna Park received their grandchildren's college fund, restored in full, $30,000 deposited into a 529 plan that neither Marcus nor Vanessa could ever touch. Ruth Pemberton received her debts cleared and a monthly stipend for 2 years while she rebuilt. The remaining victims, 9 of them, received proportional distributions based on documented losses. Catherine Park managed the fund with the precision of a surgeon. Every dollar was tracked. Every receipt was filed. Raymond insisted on transparency because transparency was the thing his family had destroyed. In April, Judge Simmons handed down the sentences. Vanessa received 14 years in federal prison. No parole eligibility for 7. Marcus received 9 years, reduced from the recommended 12 because he had cooperated fully after his guilty plea, providing access to encrypted files, offshore account passwords, and the name of David Whitfield, who was subsequently disbarred and charged separately with conspiracy and obstruction. Gloria was not imprisoned. Her cooperation agreement held 3 years of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and full participation in the restitution process. She moved to a small apartment in Decatur. Raymond did not know the address. He did not ask. The divorce was finalized in May. 41 years of marriage dissolved in a 17-page document. Catherine Park ensured the prenuptial agreement's fraud clause was enforced. Gloria retained her personal belongings, a modest savings account, and nothing else. No claim to the Buckhead townhouse, no claim to the investment portfolio, no claim to the man she had betrayed. Raymond did not celebrate. He sat in his study that evening with a glass of bourbon and watched the sun set through the tall windows. The house was quiet. Not the suffocating quiet of December 23rd, when silence had meant exile and conspiracy. This was a different quiet. Earned. Chosen. Clean. In June, Raymond established the Carter Justice Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing free legal consultation to elderly Americans targeted by financial fraud. He funded it with $500,000 from the estate sale and recruited 3 retired attorneys from his professional network. Catherine Park joined the advisory board. Denise Watkins agreed to serve as the FBI liaison, connecting victims to the foundation before cases reached federal threshold. Margaret Holloway became the foundation's first community ambassador. She traveled to senior centers across Georgia, telling her story, warning others, holding hands with strangers who had been too ashamed to admit they had been deceived. She was extraordinary at it. She had the authority of survival. Raymond taught a seminar at Emory Law that fall. Elder law and financial exploitation. 12 students enrolled. He stood at the front of the classroom, 70 years old, hands steady, voice clear, and said, "The law is not a weapon. It is a shield. And the people who need that shield most are the ones who cannot hold it themselves. That is your job. That is why you are here." On a Saturday morning in October, Raymond drove to the Federal Correctional Facility in Jessup, Georgia. He parked in the visitor lot, walked through security, and sat in a plastic chair across from his son. Marcus looked thinner, older. His eyes were bloodshot and his hands trembled slightly on the metal table. He said, "I did not think you would come." Raymond said, "You are my son." They sat in silence for a long time. Neither man apologized. Neither man forgave. But Raymond placed his hand flat on the table, palm up, and Marcus, after a full minute, placed his hand on top of it. They stayed that way until the guard called time. Raymond drove home through the Georgia pines, windows down, October air cool against his face. The road stretched ahead, long and straight and open. He was 70 years old. He had lost his wife, his daughter-in-law, and for now, his son. He had lost 41 years of trust. He had lost the version of his family he believed existed, but he had not lost himself. And in the quiet of that car, on that straight road, with the pines standing tall on either side like sentinels, Raymond Carter understood that this was enough. Not happiness, not victory, but enough. The road continued, and so did he.